Welcome to Making Pondo and Talking Pondo. Talking Pondo is a podcast where we pick out 2 movies each week and talk about them in detail. Making Pondo is a podcast where we talk to people we've made films with and we discuss all their experiences on set.
All right, and we're back. What's going on, Marty?
We are back.
We are back.
It's episode 12, Talking
Episode
Pondo
12.
format at least, you know.
That's right. Episode probably, 15 or something like that in the whole series.
3
maybe?
goes into 12 to 4, blah, blah, blah. With that.
Somebody with the algebra, and let's say 15, 16.
Something like that.
16. Who knows? All right, anyway.
Let
So
us
this
know.
week it was, I gave you Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
The Adventures of Priscilla.
The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, yes. And you gave me...
I gave you Tu Wong Fu. It's a Julie Newmar. Which, I swear to God, I was watching this and I thought, okay, where's John Leguizamo?
We'll get into it.
I got it confused because they both came out around the same time. And I don't think I've ever seen either one of them before. Now, I gave you Knightriders to follow on the theme of A Knight's Tale because when else are we ever going to get to talk about jousting again?
Because jousting, yeah.
It went over so well last time. But this movie's jousting doesn't have exploding sticks, and that might make the difference for some people.
I feel like it makes it a little more actiony. Which one do you want to conquer first there?
Either way,
What did we cover mine last time first? Let's go with Knightriders.
Okay, let's do Knightriders.
Let's do Knightriders. Why not? All right, so let me find my notes here because I have a few.
Back to 1981. I think the last time we were in 81 was around Dragon Slayer. And it's weird that all these kind of King Arthur-esque movies like Excalibur came out all in 81. For some reason, we had an obsession with King Arthur. I feel like Monty Python and the Holy Grail had something to do with this.
Well, you've got Borman's Excalibur, you've got Dungeons and Dragons exploding all over the place. Mm-hmm. You've got Dragon Slayer from that time. Fantasy was very, very big, and there were a lot of big fantasy movies being done. I think this is probably the second generation that grew up on T.H. White, maybe, because I think he wrote King Arthur in the
that sounds about right. Yeah.
But this is obviously Corman cashing in on the Arthurian legend zeal that's going on around the country. He's like, oh, let me think, what can I do with knights? Oh, okay, I'll do jousting on motorcycles. Side hacking on motorcycles.
I don't think Corman has anything to do with this.
Oh, was this not a Corman movie?
No,
my bad. Really?
Let's double check.
Could have sworn this was a Corman movie. Holy crap, that's maybe my bad. Huh. I'm an idiot. Oh, Romero. My bad. Sorry, Romero. My bad. Jeez. Gonna get yelled at in the comments. So Romero, yeah. So it feels like Romero's cashing in on the Arthurian craze at this point. This movie, I gotta be honest, this movie was a tough watch for me. It's way too long. It's 2 hours and 25 minutes.
Yeah, it's another one of those classic examples of these indie movies that back then you could have a longer kind of art movie, but now I look at it and I go, oh, long indie movie means didn't have an editor telling them what needs to go, right? And I got a whole section on the length of the film. Watching it again this time, it reminded me of like Bottle Shock. Right, and what did we talk about that one? That weird romantic subplot that didn't really need to be there. Everything about Alan, the character Alan, who's kind of the Lancelot-esque character.
Oh, he's definitely Lancelot,
and it's like everything with him and his romantic thing. That's your extra 20 minutes. I thought this time going around watching it, I'm like, if you chop that, then you're down to at least like maybe not even 2 hours.
I feel like you could have
the contest a little bit,
I feel like you could have cut some of the Friar Tuck stuff, some of the announcer stuff, some of the announcer stuff, and gotten that out of the way. There's a whole scene.
That's the thing about weird indie movies
Yeah,
on blank check film like this one. You get to throw it all in. Weird.
yeah, yeah. So I start with my notes. Start with so a minute in, there's a topless woman, and I think you know what you're getting into right away. Um, and then
1981.
you get Ed Harris naked, and he's beating himself with a stick, and okay.
He's got issues.
And yeah, so am I supposed to laugh when he comes riding out of the woods on his motorcycle? Because I at the very beginning, because I did laugh hysterically.
Right? See, that's what, the first time I watched it, I'm like, this is going to be completely goofy, right?
Yeah, it
It can't
was.
be serious.
No, it was. And right away, you can't. God, it reminded me so much of these because it's kind of a not a character piece per se, but it's kind of like about a certain person and their ideals and
Mm-hmm.
how everybody's following those ideals and falling in line with them, and those ideals are sort of outside of mainstream society.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're like ex hippie and motorcycle gang of the '60s
yeah,
idealism that's kind
trying
of
to live a
become ring
different type of
tested.
lifestyle than what society's telling them to live, and that type of
Kind
thing.
of like what we do as filmmakers. That's kind of like I look
Yeah,
at
a
the
little
whole
bit.
thing
I
as the
mean,
allegory as to filmmakers is you guys are doing this weird outsider art doesn't make any sense. What the fuck are you doing? Oh, I don't
it's
want to sell out, that whole
yeah,
thing. But
yeah. I don't want to sell out.
if you
I'm
don't
not really
sell
doing
out,
this to make
quote
money. I'm doing
unquote,
this for
yeah.
a pure reason,
But you have to
which
pay the bills, you have to keep everybody fed, you have to keep the machine going, right? You can't shoot a movie and not feed the people. It's just there's so many things like that entrenched in it that is why
hmm
it's appealing to me.
hmm
But I can understand why the movie's got some pacing issues.
um, all throughout the movie, I have a lot of notes about the coverage and about. I mean, it's a decent looking film.
Mm-hmm.
Like it looks good. It was shot well. Whoever I'm not sure who the DOP was, but it was shot pretty well. It's not like it's an ugly film to watch in any by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a bad script. It's just not a good. It's not. The film is a lot of speeches all strung together
Mm-hmm.
instead of moments strung together,
Mm.
right? Like you just go from scene to scene where one character's like for 2 or 3 minutes just talking about whatever thing, and at the same time, but not really giving you the exposition that you need to understand what in the hell is going on and why things are like they are. It's just like suddenly the cops show up and we're not paying you. You get the hell out of here. And it's like, what's the context? What's the context?
Well,
Uh,
the way I saw that was, and one of those cops is
and
in
that's
Scarface.
just an example, but throughout the movie, the writing seems to me to kind of lack the context of like why is this so important? Why is this? What's the struggle here?
Oh,
What do we?
why won't he
Yeah,
pay him off?
why won't he pay him off? Why
Why
is
does
it
he have to
because
be so obstinate about it?
right? Why
I
does he
kind of
have to
wondered
be?
that too. It's like,
Yeah,
but it's
what's the character's? I hate to say it this way, but what's the freaking character's motivation?
Mhm. Well,
Right?
he's obviously losing his nut a little bit, right?
To
And
a certain
he's
extent, but
kind of off his
why?
rocker in a way.
What is it? Is he a Vietnam vet come back from the war trying to live a different life?
It
Is
is
he?
interesting how the movie doesn't provide subtext on anybody, but it gives
Mm-hmm.
you ideas that they're all kind of escaping lives that kind of could be any of these backstories, right?
And
But
maybe
without
the
putting any of that in there, maybe you can project
maybe
yourself
the
onto any of the different
yeah maybe the
people.
context comes from being a little bit closer to that time period and having lived in it and understanding that, but to me
Hmm.
it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, this movie shot in 81, but this movie feels like it is smack in the late 70s, so hardcore.
Oh
it,
yeah, it's one of those last vestiges of
it feels like
filmmaking.
1978. It feels like 1978 all over it.
Oh, I think I wrote an explanation as to what I thought the Billy character represented for me this time watching it. I
Okay.
felt that he just represented the radicalism of the late 60s. And
hmm
by the time you get to 1978, 79, almost all those people are
it's
either
dead, it's kind of
dead or it's
dying. Yeah.
gone. And so, of course, that's what's going to happen to his character. I hadn't
Well,
seen it that
that
way
makes the
before, but
ending
it's like
that
his
makes the
weird
ending make a lot more
idealism.
sense. That
So
makes
is
the
it
ending
like
make a lot more sense. Yeah.
is it an accident? Does he get hit by the truck? Did he just decide he had taken care of everything that he needed to? Or I don't know. That's kind of weird too, but
well, is he dying and decided that he'd rather die that way than, bleeding to death and falling off his motorcycle? Anyway, we're jumping ahead.
I'm all over the place on this.
So right away, the angry daughter with the slob dad is just a straight up trope. The good girl meeting the pretty boy, and one of the things I noticed is that the movie's just full of Kawasaki's with no Harleys. It's all Hondas and Kawasaki's. We're like, where are the hogs? And it seems like all the guy the bikers that show up to participate in the joust but aren't part of it, they're the ones riding the Harleys.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway, it's well shot. But it seems like they could have made the sets a little bit more elaborate. Could have spent all these, this traveling circus, because the movie's really about being in the circus and traveling with the circus and living outside of the norms of society or whatever. So it just seemed like they could have spent a little bit more money to make that just a little bit more lived in, and it would have really sold a bit more. I dug that Stephen King cameo though. That was great.
Oh yeah, that was good. Yeah, both Stephen King and Tabitha King in their It's interesting you bring that up. This movie was part of I think it was a 3-picture deal that Romero had with Laurel Entertainment. I think was the name of the company.
Yeah, Laurel indeed. Yep.
So he made Dawn of the Dead, and then I think he was going to make Creepshow right after this with Ed Harris again. And so this is like the middle movie where he kind of got that blank check to be like, oh, I can finally make something that's not a horror film. And so this was like
something
his
that I want to make.
attempt at a drama that somebody allowed him to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's well shot. I mean, I keep saying that, but there's really some nice sequences. The action scenes are but there's some singular stuff that they do where he's just like, he decides to just, okay, here's a beautiful establishing shot. Here's a nice location I'm going to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some really nice stuff in the movie like that.
Well, there's a reason why it's mostly undiscovered or forgotten about, or considered a lesser one in his catalog. But after watching nothing but his zombie flicks, and then discovering this, and like we were saying, oh, it's going to be so goofy. And 20, 30 minutes into it, I'm like into it in a way where it's like, I couldn't get
they're
in their world where to them it's like they're like they're kind of like early con life, right? They're already into their weird cosplay and stuff years before anybody else is. And,
well, it's definitely the Ren Fair.
Yeah, but I mean, it's that weird element of the biker, and I guess
the biker Ren Fair
element together. But like you say, you're right. It's like a series of more like speeches, like it's more like a Billy Jack type movie. Like it's one of the last of its kind of that type, where we're just going to be these over the top caricatures of people.
Well, and
you're not kind of real characters mixed in there too. So
look, you're not going to see another movie like it. I mean, there's no other movie like Knightriders. There's for sure. But I'd rather watch the jousting in A Knight's Tale, to be honest with you. I wonder what this armor was made of. I mean, neoprene, foam rubber, the normal stuff that people use now to kind of do con costumes wasn't readily available back then.
Right.
And so I kind of wonder what this stuff was made of. It's obvious that it's constructed on motorcycle helmets because those helmets look ridiculously big.
Oh, yeah.
Really big. But it kind of sells.
In a 1981 kind of way,
Yeah. And we don't really know that. My problem with the film is that we don't really know what the stakes are. It's like the dialogue is... The dialogue isn't great. It moves it kind of wanders. You get a lot of speeches that are supposed to give you exposition, but you still don't really get enough to know what the stakes are. Why is it important that he doesn't joust? Why is he, if you had set it up with some exposition, said like, hey, this dude's been kicking his ass the last 6 months and he kind of refuses and these guys keep rushing out to protect him so he can't lose his
Well,
his
it tells you
crown.
that, but it tells you that in a really
In a
roundabout
really funky, in a really funky. It tells you that 15 minutes after
way.
you've seen the action, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, now I understand what the stakes are, but I didn't understand at the time, so I'm just watching a bunch of, honestly, some batch of bad second unit show me a bunch of side hacking over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, so me going back to it a couple times because there was parts of it that interested me. It was like, oh, now I know what's going on when you get to those parts. Like I realized this time that if what's the Black Knight's name? Morgan?
Morgan.
Name?
Yeah, Morgan.
If he had just won in that first one where Billy got hurt, they could have avoided this whole thing because he would have been king. He would have paid that cop off. They would have gone to the next level. The kid with the magazine would have showed up and he would have signed the magazine. Don't be an asshole. This kid doesn't view you as some sellout. He just wants you to sign the magazine.
He just wants the magazine. Yeah. Also signing the magazine in pencil. Thanks, dude. That's really great. I noticed he signs he's like, let me sign that, kid, and he pulls out a pencil. There's a Destiny speech by first off, the Butterfly Doctor is fantastic. He's probably my favorite character in the whole thing. But he does a Destiny speech where he basically retells the tale of Arthur, and it takes like 4 or 5 minutes, and you're just like, dude, come on.
Yeah, editor. Yeah.
We all know this. That the first 30 minutes of that movie is all the games.
Yeah.
It's way too long. It's just you'd like, and you're going to keep saying needed an editor, and I'm going to keep saying you're absolutely right.
Yeah, there's a way to make a compact version, but this director's cut is the movie itself.
Okay. So were we watching the director's cut?
No, I'm just saying the version of the movie is
the director's cut. Yeah. See, it easily needs about 30 minutes cut out of it. Easily. If you could get this down to about 145, 150, it'd probably move a lot better. There's, like I said, there's a lot of decent looking shots, artistic looking stuff in this film that it would sell it and make it better if it wasn't dragged down by the constant just, okay, move to this speech. Here's a new scene with another speech. Wow.
To me, like I said earlier, it was the Alan subplot. Everything with his romantic interests with the girl with the slob father, the dead end of where she gets dropped off. What's she going to get beat by the dad again? Is that where her storyline ends? It's like, what is going on here? I never have figured out where that is. I figure it's just that 70s filmmaking where it's just, it's bleak, but we don't have to have an ending.
She meets some. Yeah. So she goes to the motorcycle Ren fair with her parents, her dad, who's obviously beating on his mom and is a drunk, and meets a dude who rides motorcycles, and immediately is like, see you guys, I'm out of here. It's like, what the hell? I also feel like, and I don't want to be crass or crude, but this is the type of movie that really could have benefited from more nudity. Like, I'm sorry, but just, there wasn't enough. If you're going to do this type of movie, put some nudity in it. I'm just kidding. I'm kind of not. There was a line in the movie called where Ed Harris screams, "I'm fighting the dragon."
Yeah.
And I broke down into peals of laughter. Like, I just could not stop laughing. And they keep asking this dude if he's gay in that scene. Was like, leave that guy alone. Why do you keep asking if he's gay?
Not handled very sensitively at all.
They just keep going, are you gay? Are you gay? Are you,
And it's like, is this a reflection of how things were handled at this time? Like, people were that crass. And later we
have to sit through a 4-minute argument about it later where how dare you, and you made me realize I'm gay by asking me I'm gay. What in the hell is that? It was just very weird.
Oh, I thought he was just finally coming out to her at that point.
I think there's a line in it where he's like, and you put, making me realize that in front of everybody. And I was just like, okay, that's weird.
But yeah, all of those scenes can benefit probably from a little bit of trimming as well.
Yeah. So I guess the theme is, how do you live in a modern world when you're trying to have the values of a knight or the values of an Arthurian I don't, the theme of the film sometimes is hard for me to follow because it turns into kind of a piece about the character later in the film. It's not really about him in the beginning. It's more about side hacking and the Ren Fair and this motorcycle Ren Fair and the cops and the fame that's coming. And then it turns into this lonely character piece of a guy who's giving up his crown, right?
Can you hold your 60s ideas as we move into the 80s?
Yeah.
Can you still do the same thing that you did then and do it in the same way? Or is it going to get bigger and it's getting bigger, but you're bitching about it at the same time, right? And the dude's trying to tell him, like his lawyer, and they bail him out. He's like, I'm just trying to help you guys and shit, and of course I'm trying to set you up with the agent, who is the guy from Jurassic Park.
The guy from Jurassic Park, yes, exactly, yes. The guy who gets eaten by the T-Rex. I have that in my notes, underlined heavily.
The asshole, or I should say the sleazeball agent that comes in to try to sign them to be like the next Evil Knievel or whatever,
the next Evil Knievel, which is what he tells the kid is, I'm not evil. This is Evil Knievel. I'm not Evil Knievel.
And then Morgan soon realizes, well, this is the exact thing we're trying to get away from, because now we have no control over what we're doing. We have to do exactly what they're telling us to do.
Right.
Which makes you wonder, as far as filmmaking allegory goes, how much of that goes to doing it independently versus you're taking the studio's money and now you have to do it their way. And so I feel like there's a lot of that kind of reflection in it. Like, it's as closest to an autobiographical story that Romero put into a film, even though it's, obviously through all allegory and stuff. Well, I got to talk to him briefly. He did mention that it was his most personal work. He told me so. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. I was like, I look at it like it's like the microcosm of their community. It was like, to me, it was like essentially filmmaking, and everybody's got their weird little piece of it.
Well, filmmaking is outsider. Filmmaking is joining the circus. Yeah.
And sometimes you got to pay the cop off, but maybe one day you're so pissed at paying that cop off so many times, right? Like, it's the wrong thing to do, but it's like, well, wouldn't it make everybody's life easier? It's just these weird moral dilemmas, and you get to see what happens here, where even the cop is like, as he's arresting him, he's like, fuck, like, I don't want to.
Just give me the money, dude. Like, why are you being a hard ass? Just give me the money.
Take you in here and beat the shit out of you.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even caught that before. Oh, a tie into last week with Running Scared. That cop is in Scarface. It's like fucking Manolo was in Scarface. He's one of the bodyguards for Tony towards the end of the movie. When the assassin's showing up and taking him out one by one. He's one of the last ones to go. So we have yet a second week of Scarface connection there.
So going back to my notes, I liked the inclusion of the gay character. I liked the idea that they were talking about that in 81 and kind of talking about
it. That's unusual.
Yeah. It's unusual for that time period. And it wasn't accusatory. It was more sort of just a stupid curiosity, I guess. Like, just very insensitive, but at the same time, not trying to be, I don't know, like a kid who would ask about something.
Right. Because the characters were friends.
Yeah. But it's hard not to see the differences in how those characters are handled in that movie and then the movie that we're going to talk about next.
Yeah. What an interesting,
just like a wow. Like when I watched this one, especially because I watched Adventures first. And then when I watched this one, I was like, God damn, we've come a long way in 13 years,
Right.
Mom, I'm running away with the motorcycle guy I met at the Ren Fair. Good luck with the beatings. That whole scene where she's getting her stuff and, that's because of me, isn't it?
Write this subplot?
What in the hell is this? King wrote this part. The movie is anything but subtle, for sure. The king refuses to accept the reality of what is, and instead thinks he's on some sort of like spiritual journey, I guess. A man whose belief system isn't really in sync with the world he lives in.
Yeah, he's trying to tell him, like, this doesn't have to happen this way. And he's like, no, it's going to happen this way. The guy's going to show up, and that's going to be the end of me or whatever. And it's like, dude, you're taking this so fucking extreme. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, and the movie tends to kind of take itself a little too seriously, and it's too fucking long.
Oh yeah.
Um, the
It's
motors,
another long Ed Harris movie like The Abyss. Ed Harris will
yeah.
back The Abyss
And
over.
Harris loves to act, man, and chew that scenery for days, won't he? Um, the motorcycle stunts are just a little too random. Like at times you can barely kind of tell what's going on. But it does have its moments of good shots and good storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that's buried in some bad dialogue and a little bit of bad storytelling. You know, it's just it it feels like it could have been better.
Right.
You know, it just feels like, man, dang, if you'd have had another writer go over this and kind of trim it up and make it a
It could
little
have
bit,
pulled
you
out
know,
all those
yeah,
elements that you were
exactly.
trying to go for. That those are the diamonds in the rough that I kind of see in it, where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I get what you were going for. I know the movie's execution doesn't pull it out all the way, but there's enough
Yep.
there for I'm like overall I go, okay, I get what you're trying to do from this, but I totally know what you mean. There's a way to do it and
Yeah.
really hammer
Uh-huh.
punch home.
Mm-hmm. Tom Savini in Speedos is something I could have been spared my entire life of seeing. Um, the movie moves from, like I said, speech to speech, moment instead of
He
moment
gets
to
a
moment.
chance to act in a movie for a change. I
He
mean,
does, and he's fine.
mhm.
He does a serviceable job. It's just I just didn't need to see him in Speedos.
Oh yeah, of course.
Um, the guys who split off can't handle the lack of what I call structural freedom that they had in the circus, right?
That's why
Because
they were there.
in the circus they had the ability to knock each other around, laugh, get up in the morning and go about what they were doing, and they weren't going to get in trouble. But when you go into a hotel room and you bust up a bunch of shit and you act like morons, suddenly there are consequences,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I felt like that scene alone was a very good representation of what he was trying to do in the movie, which was this, like you've been saying, this, I don't know, like you said, burnouts from the 60s, Vietnam vets coming home, whatever, these people, these outcasts. There was a lot of those movies in the 70s about people who just didn't fit into society and what they were doing. And that Americana comes to mind
Mm-hmm.
with Scott Glenn, where he comes back and
Mm-hmm.
he's a Vietnam vet and he fixes up a carousel for some reason and pisses off the town. I can't remember the whole movie, but it feels that same
Mm-hmm.
tone. I
And
don't
then the
know.
very next year, I think it was, or was it 82? Then we get First Blood.
Then we get First Blood, right? And this has a First Blood feel to it too, with that whole man out of step with society and living his own ideals and his own morals type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And those were weirdly, when you think about movies back then, there were a lot of them that did that.
Yeah.
Why is the native dude following him halfway through the picture? Like he shows up in the background in the town and then suddenly he's Percival, who's following,
Right. Like
and he gets knighted.
he buys in after that first experience with Billy and going, thinking, why is this guy fucking crazy? Why is he targeting me? Right. And then
Yeah.
he buys into the whole King
Mm-hmm.
Arthur thing. And that's why when Billy takes off, he follows him to. I'm thinking, well, yeah, how else is anybody ever even going to know that he gets hit by a truck unless somebody was out there watching him to report
Right.
back? I think.
Yeah. So at one point, so Savini and his boys break off. They run off to sign this contract. They're going to be Evel Knievel, and immediately realize, well, not immediately, but very soon after, realize that they can't function outside of this structure that they have,
Mm-hmm.
and they go back to join the king again, who's been waiting for him, convinced that they're going to come back. And he was right.
Mm-hmm.
End of movie. Boom, done.
Yeah.
Handshakes and head and all around, and then they go off into the sunset to continue to
Right.
do their little thing over and over again and exist.
Really,
But
you
no,
really could have stopped it.
we need 30 more minutes,
Mhm.
George.
And yet,
30
there's
more
still
fucking
some
minutes.
decent stuff in the last 30 minutes, though. It's more of this if you could compact everything. Because I do like when he shows up at the school. How did he find that kid? How did he know where the kid was? I realized I'm
Exactly.
not supposed to think that hard about it.
Exactly.
But he gives the kid his armor and shit, like he's having a change of heart on that, and he beats the shit out of the cop
Mm-hmm.
in the diner. And those are good scenes, but you do have to sit through an extra half hour when it's kind of like
It's
that golden
it's
rule of the monster died, the movie's over, kind of.
yeah, I mean, Savini's new outfit that he shows up in makes him look like a backup member for Kiss.
And yet at the
Um,
time, it was probably awesome.
Yeah, at the time, exactly. I'm sure it was. But there's a whole 15-minute sequence where Ed Harris sits on a throne and watches these dudes beat the shit out of each other, and he just laughs. He's just like,
Oh yeah,
"This
the
is
battle
great.
royale part.
Yeah, this is the best day of my entire life.
All
Wonderful."
led to this. They're all beating each other up.
They're all killing each other. I have a note here that says, so he loses and leaves, which is such a weird ending. And as he's riding off, which, before he gets to the whole cop thing and everything, I have a note that says he later became a stockbroker, bought a house in Boca Raton, and has 5 kids.
Well, in a way,
because that's what happens to all these. That's what happens to
right?
all these hippies. They all sell out and they become yuppies.
Mm-hmm. And he was not cut out for the 80s.
It's like he didn't know how to end the movie or tie up those. So he decides to tie up the loose threads by doing the cop and the kid. Yeah. And it's a bleak ending.
And of course, King Arthur dies, and we're your bleak 70s ending.
Yeah, it's a bleak ending. It was, I don't know, needlessly sad, maybe. I don't know. Like it just seems like it was an interesting ending. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
It was like but at the same time, very kind of, I don't know. The 70s had a lot of that where the hero just sort of gets killed at the end or gives himself up or dies or whatever. And that's supposed to be meaningful or in some way
I just look at
tragic.
it as, how the 60s didn't work out and the fallout.
Yeah.
It goes all the way back to like Easy Rider and movies like that.
Exactly.
This movie, out of all the Romero movies, obviously correct me if I'm wrong I would say in the show notes, but we write the show notes, on the social media.
Hey, hit us up on social media. Yeah, our social media is in our show notes.
I think this movie has the most of the Romero troupe of all of his movies. Like there's one actor from The Crazies in it. There's a couple people from Dawn of the Dead. There's a couple people from Day of the Dead. So it's like this weird crossover of all the various, you get to see Ken Faree in there as the armor,
and Ken, and what that was the crazy part is that Ken didn't really have anything to do in the movie.
Mm-hmm. He's just
part of the community in it. He's got lines and stuff, but
he's the device that injures Billy and starts the whole thing off. But
he's the blacksmith, but at the same time, it's like, is it anyway? Yeah,
what else do I have to say about it? I have much like in A Knight's Tale, there's a part of the movie where the people playing the horn, we're really not hearing the horn sound, right?
Right.
Playing different music.
Mm-hmm.
Might be one of the only connections between the two films.
That and the jousting.
So I said all my things about how I look at it as filmmaking being on set outside of society, and sometimes you have to pay somebody $100 so they'll shut that fucking parrot up. I think there's enough frustration that he was given a blank check to make a movie about it and somehow got caught up in the whole Arthurian thing, like you were saying. And one day we'll get to Excalibur, because I think that might be the other one from 81 that was Arthur obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at it now, it's like there's that early reflection of con life, that those Renfest that would basically become what we know now as con life, and just they want to continue to live in that. And I can understand why you would want to run away and join the circus in a way, because I enjoy my time at a convention.
Well, it was, it says here it's filmed in Pennsylvania. It was a nice.
It was a connection again. That vibe. Yeah.
It was. There's a UK version that's an hour and 42 minutes long. That's the version I want to watch in the future.
I wonder, do they cut the Allen subplots down, or they go visit the family and that one guy does the whole Marlon Brando impersonation, and it's like, now if I've ever seen a deleted scene that got left in the movie.
Overall, it really felt like George's earnest attempt to make a normal type of movie. And and when I say normal, I mean something that isn't horror based.
Yes.
It is about a man on a quest, on a search for something greater than himself. It does have some really pretty shots in it. There are some very just pretty shots.
Mm-hmm.
But it suffers from just somebody needed to go over that script with George
Mm-hmm.
and really help him with the exposition and the dialogue and the speeches, and then he really needed an editor to tell him this thing's too fucking long, dude.
Oh yeah.
Overall, for me, 2 stars.
Oh, okay. So, as the tagline of the movie says, Camelot is a state of mind. And
Mm-hmm.
after watching the
Camelot is a
movie a
state of
couple
mind.
times and then how it relates to filmmaking, uh, I realized, well, yeah, anybody can be the King Arthur in a way. Both you and I have become our own King Arthurs in a way, with where we pull in Geoff and Eric and we pull together our group of outsiders and we make our thing. And there's enough in this movie that gave me those feels throughout that I give it 4 stars for myself personally, even though I know most people are not going to like this movie. Most people are probably going to be more in the 2 or the 2.5. But for me, it was enough personal stuff that hit. So
4 stars. Okay. All right. You say 4 stars, it's 4 stars. You got it.
Based on my wacky talking Pondo rating scale. Because otherwise, I'd never give a controversial rating if I give a normal rating every week.
I know this has been a favorite of yours for a long time. I
I
understand why.
I only discovered it a few years ago too.
I understand why it is yours, and I get it. But at the same time, it's just not for me.
Oh, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think a lot of people in the comments. I think you'll get. It's a very polarizing movie.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have people that love it and people that hate it.
You know, the more movies we watch on this show, the more I realize that there is an audience for every movie, and not every movie is for me. But that kind of makes sense because those movies are for somebody else. So is there such a thing as a truly bad movie? Because maybe that bad movie, like, wasn't it go back to that Tom Hanks on the Inside the Actor Studio? My favorite movie is Turner and Hooch. No, don't laugh at this one.
Don't boo her. Yeah, don't laugh at this one.
If she likes, then.
So moving on, we got The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is
1994. Here we go. So, I don't think we've ever done this year before.
13 years later, here we go.
A movie that, as I watched it, I kept thinking it was much later. Like but no, this is not late 90s. This has early 90s sensibilities. Big difference, I think. Makes the movie much more watchable for me.
Okay.
Because it just had that, that like 90 to 94, maybe a little 95. Everybody was putting out stuff that was a little tripped out, a little off, bizarre, weird, trying to be off the beaten path, and I appreciate that. I like watching stuff like that. It's fun. It's like, it was a nice breath of fresh air,
Right, yeah. So this is written and directed by a guy named Stephen Elliott. Stephen? Apologies.
Seems like he hasn't done a whole lot else that I'm familiar with.
Yeah. He's done, Welcome to the Whoop Whoop, Eye of the Beholder, A Few Best Men, just a few things here and there. But
we're back to Australian filmmaking again.
Yeah, and most of what he's done, he's written.
Mm-hmm.
So he's obvious. So he's a pretty hardcore writer director.
So this was a nice little breakout movie in '94 from Australia that kind of hit the indie circuit. Did it do well at Sundance or something like that? It must have done something. I remember its home video release.
Yeah, it did really well. Mm-hmm. Other than Mad Max, this is the only early Australian movie I was ever aware of.
Oh yeah, well there's Croc,
Yeah, maybe, but
Crocodile Dundee,
Yeah, Crocodile Dundee. But other than that, I mean, this is,
yeah, as far
a
as
lot of Australian movies didn't cross over. Crocodile Dundee was kind of a phenomenon.
Yeah, that's an illegal.
That's an illegal its own. Yeah.
That out. Mm-hmm. This was put out probably like by Fine Line Pictures or somebody like that back in the day. Something that was shown at the Loft, I'm guessing.
It definitely was a kind of an art house type picture for sure. Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure who put this out.
It was very nice that during that time period I was talking about, that early 90s, that a movie like this could be sitting at Blockbuster next to everything else, where the indie movies like this would just be sitting next to Natural Born Killers or Pulp Fiction, Speed, and The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which I discovered as a first-time viewer. That's the name of the bus.
Yes, that is the name of the bus.
Priscilla is the bus,
The
not
bus
any of the
is...
characters. Hugo Weaving is not Priscilla.
No one in the film is Priscilla. The
That
bus
means
is
you just watched
Priscilla.
the trailer.
And you touch upon one of the things that are in my notes, which is they did a really good job of making the bus its own personality.
Yeah,
Like
the road movie.
they really dressed that bus up. They made it one of the notes I have about it is that apparently the bus was so small that they actually had to hide people who were filming it and people who needed to be on the bus while they were filming shots behind curtains, behind couches, behind clothing. They did a great job of it because you can't see it.
I would never would have known. Yeah.
No, same here. They just, but yeah, that Priscilla bus. Also, the balls to paint the bus halfway through the movie.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing an indie shoot, I think what I heard is this movie cost about $5 million US to make back in '94.
That's nothing.
That's nothing. I mean, it's a lot of money, but that's not a ton of money.
That's just going to the
especially when you're going to shoot in the outback with all these people and in different locations. And it was a smart choice to film on the bus and to limit the cast and the crew, because they didn't have to, because it's like, okay, bus shots, town shots, bus shots, town shots. Yeah. And the film is basically about 3 drag queens, one in particular who drags 2 others in Sydney to go into the middle of the desert of the outback in a place called Alice Springs to play a show there for 2 weeks to help out his ex-wife.
Mm-hmm. They find out that he had a wife and
a kid later on. But
does he kind of represent the bisexual type character in a way? I mean, they never really but it's the closest thing.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't usually see that type of character represented in cinema at all. Yeah. How often do you see an actual, even close to bisexual character represented? So I thought that was interesting. And then also, not to go off on too much of a tangent, Terrence Stamp makes me completely forget that he was ever in Superman movies because he disappears completely.
Into that character. I love that. I like what you just said because one of my notes is about the fact that they don't define anything in the film.
Right.
And at one point where Adam, played by Guy Pearce, and Hugo Weaving's character,
who also didn't know it was Guy Pearce till the credits rolled.
Yeah.
I went, oh.
This is when you caught these two coming up in '94. I mean, Hugo Weaving 5 years later is in The Matrix, and then Guy Pearce is in L.A. Confidential in '98. I mean, these guys blow up big time. And of course, Terrence Stamp has always been the solid veteran killer actor that he is, and it's this great mix of talent. But one of the things he says, there's a scene where they're dancing outside the bus. You have to, when the outback and the fire's going. And Tick and Adam are dancing, and Adam says, "So you're straight?" And he goes, "No." And he goes, "So you're a donut puncher?" And he goes, "No." And he goes, "Then what the fuck are you?" And he goes, "I don't fucking know."
He's like, "I don't know."
And they both start laughing, and that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like take your labels and shove it up your ass. I'm not going to live by that. I'm not going to, you know what I mean? I really like that. I really enjoyed that. I also thought that this is probably one of the easily best handled representations of a trans person in a movie.
Oh, especially
especially in '94.
Say all that you want about it, but looking at it from 1994, there's nothing else like this. I mean, I know Terrence Stamp is not a transgender woman in real life, but back then they didn't give people roles based on who they were. They probably should have been giving opportunities at the time.
That's true. The representation is different.
I think he did a good job of
He did a fantastic job.
And they also don't lean into it too much. You have to pay attention to the movie to know.
Yeah. There's a scene where they're in the water and you kind of see that he's got breasts. He, she, Jesus.
He's also taking his medication on the daily as well.
Shut up and eat your hormones. Yeah. I feel like the film handles it in a way because it just is. They don't comment on it. They don't question it. These people just are.
And usually a movie from that time period is going to be full of tropes and
full of conversations about it and so on.
And so the elephant in the room, which I'll only talk about briefly, is even though this movie has all of this elements of treating everybody equally and stuff, it certainly has, and I looked online, a lot of other people feel the same way, is why is this have in 1994 one of the worst Asian stereotype characters in a film? Very odd. Like
it is a I your wife.
Yeah, it's like,
my wife
got a weird viewpoint on
my wife will scream that to me across the aisles at a Walmart when she can't find me. She'll go, "I your wife." And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus Christ."
Oh yeah, everybody. Most of the reviews say we love this movie, but we don't understand why this weird display happens in the middle of the movie. Yeah.
Not all films are perfect. Not all things are perfect. I feel like you can kind of overlook that due to what the movie's doing, but I also get that it's kind of
too important to be thrown to the side just because it has that. It has a weird, an odd treatment of women and straight people in this movie where they're all kind of overly sexed and sleazy, but then when the element of her doing the ping pong ball things happens, it's like, oh, it's kind of like Boy and This Dog again, where I'm like, well, it's just asexual, though. There's nothing to me. I look at it and I go, well, they're showing it like, see how they're getting off on this, but I'm like, oh, but you're also showing that that's just kind of grotesque.
It's kind of grotesque, and then there's
just an odd turn, but movies took odd turns like that.
There's a moment at the end of that. If you watch that scene closely, there's a moment at the end where she's bent over and she's shooting those ping pong balls out into the bar patrons, and they cut to the three of them watching it, and Tick is horrified. His face is just like, oh my God, and Adam is laughing hysterically.
Oh, yeah, of course, because
it's the greatest thing he's ever. It's the greatest thing, and Adam's, and I feel like the characters are very well defined. Adam is that character. He's an insider. Yeah. He finds everything like that funny, whereas Tick is, But then you look at Bernadette's face, and she's just more mortified.
Yeah,
for her. She's the one who's like, "Oh God, my God, woman, don't do that to yourself." And so I kind of feel like that even that little shot sort of saves it, because you've got three different reactions to it, and the director is showing you like, yeah, this is a terrible, and yeah, it's a terrible stereotype. I'm not trying to save it at all.
We don't.
I do think
that's why I don't want to talk about it briefly, because it does.
I do think the scene is very, very funny.
But see, it also ties into something else that people have commented a lot about the movie, but I have a different viewpoint on it, because I see the Guy Pearce character as more of like, he has a lighter viewpoint on the whole thing, because he has to laugh at everything, because everything's too horrible otherwise, right?
His uncle tried to molest him when he was 8. He has to laugh at it.
Which was a great scene, because you think that's going to get so
dark. Oh my God. You think it's going to be so dark, and it just turns on a dime. And then
he's like, I'm not fucking stupid. Even as a kid, I wasn't stupid.
And my favorite is when they cut back to the two of them, and they're just collapsing in laughter.
Well, stupid's not the right word, but
No, but it's, the best thing is the dirty fuck was left there for 7 hours till mom came home, and they're just collapsing in laughter. It's fantastic.
And so it leads to something else that happens in the movie and look, 1994, I didn't even know what a dead name was. Okay, it wasn't.
I have the same note in my thing.
Mentioned, and they don't come out and name it in the movie, but when Terrence Stamp is called his dead name by the Guy Pearce character a couple times, you can tell they're not happy about hearing that name. Not at all. And so some people were like, oh, I understand why they complain about the weird Asian representation part of the movie. It was like, what was going on there? But they also throw in they call like the unfortunate dead naming. And I'm like, no, I think it's important, because it shows that
he doesn't have respect for him.
Like, why are you calling me? I don't.
Yes.
Don't call me. Like at one point,
Yes.
beat the shit out of him, right? For
yeah. Oh yeah. He beats
calling him that
the fuck
name.
out of him for calling that in public.
And I'm like, that's very progressive for a 1994 movie. Definitely.
One of the that's why I feel the film is very true to that culture.
Mm-hmm.
Is because that stuff now, even now, 25 years later, is coming out as being very important. It was important then; it's important now. But also realize that the two drag queens. You've got two drag queens who are men dressing up as women, and then you have a transsexual man who is transitioned.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the two drag queens that kind of dead name each other quite a bit. But when you dead name a transsexual, it's a much bigger deal because that person is left behind that
Exactly.
person and becomes someone and is now someone else and has decided that, right? So I noticed like there's a scene where Bernadette says, "You got us into this, Anthony Belrose, and I suggest you get us out of it." He dead name, but I don't feel like that's dead naming in the
It's
same
not
way
the
that
same because
it's not the same as calling him Ralph, right?
yeah,
Like it's a different.
he's just calling him his
It's
full surname.
he's just calling him his full surname exactly to say this is serious. I'm not going to call you Tick, and I'm not going to call you what's his actual stage, because they call themselves by their drag names quite a bit too.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't remember what they are. What's up with the lady in the Phillips? What's up with the lady dragging the because she shows up throughout the film. You remember at the very beginning of the film as they're driving off, they cut to that scene where like
yeah,
what is that?
I guess there's some context that I didn't know.
I feel like it's some sort of inside joke that I'm just not getting. But like at one point she runs by and like Adam's like, "Hello, nice night for it," in the middle of the outback, and she's just running by with this thing attached to her. It's the oddest thing about the whole movie.
Yeah, that was odd.
Yeah. So it's one of my notes is calling someone Ralph now known as dead naming, and I think it is.
It reminded me of back on the Stern Show way back, or probably around this time period, where they had a transgender on there named what was their name? Siobhan. And they would always go on the Stern Show, and there was always antics and stuff. And there was one time they were at like some kind of party, and like somebody like really pissed them off, and like they ended up talking to Gary Dell'Abate about it, and it was like I can't remember what their old dead name was, but they're like it switched back to that personality quick, like that person's still here, and if you piss me off bad enough, you don't want to see that person come out. Don't make that personality come back, and she switched back to her normal self. And it's like, oh yeah, you're always at least in that case there was a little bit of a it's like don't go there because
I feel like Priscilla is very well written. The characters have clear personalities and motives. I would love to write like this. When you're listening early on when they're driving and the two are talking about, well, after the ABBA show, Kevin got the liposuction injection to do his penis, and Bernadette's like, oh my God, can we please talk about poor Kevin's dick? And it's just
that's more of that 90s dialogue.
You sound like two slags at a pie bake off. Just these great lines. I want to talk about the costume events because there's a bunch of them. And this movie was also nominated and won an Oscar for costuming.
Yes.
There are something like 8 or 9 different distinct costume events during the movie. And there are different dance sequences and different shows. But like you've got the first one where Hugo Weaving comes out and they're doing what's the song called? Never Been to Me. And he's dressed up in the costume, and then comes out later with what's the first one that they do? I think it's the is it when they meet the Aborigine guy in the desert and they do the dance number there, I Will Survive. I think that's the next costume event. Oh, by the way, the only actual drag queen in the movie is the Aborigine guy that finds them and saves them. He is an actual drag queen in Australia.
Yeah, see, the movie has a positive view of the Aborigines.
It does. It has a very positive view of them. There's no disparaging of that culture at all within the movie that I can see to. Yeah, the walking through the town when they're doing the snap challenge and he loses and they have to get off the bus and they get off the bus in those drag outfits and they walk through the town. That's an actual. They just did that. Those people that are reacting to that are just townspeople that are reacting to them walking through dressed in those costumes. I love when they get to that first town and they meet the the listen here, you mullet, the woman in the bar, light your tampon on fire and blow your box apart because it's the only bang you're ever going to get. That's a great line.
That was one of those parts where my captions about 4 or 5 times throughout the movie would give a definition for what a word like mullet or Vegemite was. R&R was another one it did later on.
Yeah.
What does he call the party? Not a collaboration, but what is the, when they're all hanging out with the Aborigines and they're sitting down and it was another one where it was like, oh, this isn't a commonly used word in the United States, so it probably gave the definition. It said basically it meant a party.
That's interesting. There's that ode to the indie drinking scene between Bernadette and that woman.
The classic drink under the table.
That's great. That's great. One of the things that I noticed about this movie is once they start to get into the outback, the movie's tone starts to change, right? Like as they go deeper into the outback, the encounters that they have with the locals get worse and worse, right? Like the farther away you get from sort of, I want to say in parentheses, civilization, the worse the reactions are. And so you get that painting on the side of the bus as they come out after that night of drinking and they're having fun with the townspeople. And then you've got AIDS fuckers go home on the side of the bus. And that's pretty jarring.
Yeah. 2 weeks in a row with a vehicle getting graffitied.
Right.
If there was a running scared, it said undercover cop car got spray painted. That was interesting.
So my favorite scene in the movie comes up right after what we're talking about, which is they cut to Adam on top of the bus doing that opera, dressed in silver and the makeup and that shoe and all that fabric.
Yeah, just giving me
that's one of the most iconic
Operation 007 flashbacks. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Like it's one of those Italian 60s movies.
It was beautiful. The way that I don't know how many times they shot that, but to be able to, at the very end of it, the fabric floats in from frame left into frame right and floats out. And I'm thinking, how many times did you shoot that to get that just right? It's a beautiful, beautiful scene with beautiful costume.
Yeah, a lot of the desert stuff, especially towards the end, where it's giving me a Revenge of Zoe flashbacks, where I was like, oh yeah.
Yes, I love it.
They're just wandering around in the desert.
Mm-hmm. For me, the movie's kind of relentless. Like it just gives you scene after scene after scene. It doesn't let up. It's just keeps moving and moving and moving.
Both movies this week had a funeral theme. This one started with the funeral. The other one ended with one.
Yeah. I also wanted to note that I felt like drag costumes in the outback look really striking. Like the film is shot really well. It's very pretty. It's a pretty movie, especially once they get into the outback and all these, that walking up Kings Canyon in drag, and you've got those beautiful helicopter shots. It's really a fantastic looking movie.
Movies were grittier in the early 90s compared to like 96 to 99. We were getting more of that digital sheen coming in, and this movie still has that handmade feel of
it does
something you discover on cable at 3 a.m. after watching Birdie or something,
something that you just and something that immediately grabs you and that you just go, what did I just watch? This was a great movie.
And that's how a lot of movies from that time period were that were good, that were kind of that art house where it was just, there was that thing that would grab you, and it's like what we talked about before. You'd rent a movie, you'd watch it 5 or 6 times before you took it back to the store. And I never watched this one until this week. But unlike some of the other movies we've watched, I feel like the passage of time has only benefited this movie in certain
I agree.
ways. In other ways, we've transgressed so much as a society that the movie was almost dull to me because what was once shocking is now normal. And I'm like, why are you treating these people poorly? They're just people. But I remember you go in
I
'94,
agree. Yeah.
it was more of a,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not used to this culture at all, here is your very first representation on cinema that somebody might have ever seen of that.
And done in a way
It can
that's
still
not
be.
and done in a way that's not in your face or
Oh, not at
pointing
all.
at
That's why it
you.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, not making you feel bad about yourself or just whatever. It's just three characters trying to get through something that are different than you and also kind of hilarious at the same time because they all want the same things as you do. They have kids, they want love, they want to be accepted, they want to be left alone, they just want to do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
it's a
like the Knightriders in a way. They were just
yeah,
the outsider
yeah.
group.
There was definitely a tonal the thematic element there that I definitely caught in both movies. One of my favorite lines is, so you guys make the Aborigine guy's seeing him off. He goes, you guys make a living doing this? He goes, oh yeah, you can make a fine living in a pair of heels.
Right.
And it's just line after line like that. The Abaturd scene alone is both disgusting and hilarious.
Yeah,
what are you
that was
telling me that
mentioned
this
in a
is an
bunch of reviews I
Abaturd?
saw. Yeah.
And the only dud line in the entire movie is, oh, what a pretty dog. What's its name? Herpes. If she'll good, she'll heal. I'm like, dude, but bump. Come on.
That was at this. It looked like that's the same place in road games where the alarm wouldn't turn off. They were stopping to get gas. But this movie, I think, takes place in the top of the continent, where that movie took place at the bottom of the continent. Is that right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
more northern Australia.
Yeah.
So interesting that we've done 2 Aussie movies within 12 episodes covering basically the whole perimeter of the continent.
One of the things I found interesting is, okay, so let's talk about the character Bob for a minute, right? So Bob is this mechanic who was in the Navy and ended up getting drunk in a port and accidentally marrying an Asian woman who was basically trying to use him to get citizenship to come to Australia. Thought he had some money, didn't work out. But Bob is ashamed of his wife because of the ping pong ball thing and who she is. But he seems to have no reservations or hangups about the trans or the drag thing. Because he's just like, oh, I saw lay girls in my 20s and it was great and this is awesome, and it's like, it's a very interesting take on that character.
Right, so he's ashamed that he's living a lie by being married to that woman.
Or he's just ashamed of who she is and her choices. I feel like he's more ashamed of her choices than he is who she's a kind of like a sex worker, and he doesn't see being a drag or a trans like a sex worker. And maybe I'm reading that wrong, and people can hit me in the comments about it, but it sure seems like shooting ping pong balls out of your vagina is more of sex work than dancing on stage and mimicking other people's songs.
Probably not too dissimilar than the Hugo Weaving character, where it's more of the, I don't know, right? I don't know what I am. I'm in the middle, and maybe that's where all these characters kind of are in a way. I'm glad that I had a couple days to think about this one rather than having just finished it, because if I jumped into it right away, I wouldn't have had time to come to more of these conclusions about it. But you saying that makes me think, oh yeah, I guess their characters' paths are all kind of similar in that way.
To me, if a movie were a drag queen, it would be this movie. Like, if a movie were a drag queen, it would be this movie, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think it's a perfect representation.
So I've never seen Tu Wong Fu, which came out very shortly after
a year after.
And how much similarity is going on?
It's so friggin' close. It's not even funny. The difference is it's not a bus; it's a Cadillac.
Okay,
but it was also in that time of like hey, La Femme Nikita did really good in France. Let's make Point of No Return. And so they were remaking all these international movies.
Oh.
Yeah, it was giving them Hollywood turns. Yeah.
Is that
Hey,
is it a remake? Is it
yes,
an international remake? Is that really what that is?
it's a direct remake of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Oh shit! Well, then no
Yeah,
wonder I thought it was the same thing.
yeah, it is completely. It's a ripoff. It's a complete ripoff of the movie.
Well, is it a rip off or is it a
I mean, it may be a
international
sanctioned
remake?
sanctioned adaptation. I don't know, but to me, it's a ripoff. It's a poor adaptation. They get to that rough town, and Adams decides to go out and get, and fuck with those miners and stuff. And that scene for me is, that's a rough scene, man. That kid's heading for trouble the entire time.
Oh right.
In Bernadette saving him, there's a great line where Bernadette says, I've had to fight my entire life for this. You just learn how to do it after a while. That's the life that you're in. You're going to have to learn how to fight for yourself. And I thought that was really poignant. The movie's an hour 42, but I don't know. Maybe it seems a little bit longer than an hour 42. What did you think?
Well, it does. I think it feels about an hour and 42. Actually, it's you got that road movie aesthetic. You kind of just live in,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, nowadays I look at it and anything that was once considered shocking because people didn't know any different. It's almost it's almost like it's important, but it's like almost dull to me in a way because
Mm-hmm.
if it was just if they weren't drag queens and they were just like somebody going to do something somewhere, would this be as interesting?
Would this be as interesting? Yeah.
But so I don't know, product of its time, but still important that it exists. So 2.5.
Mm-hmm. 2.5, huh? Interesting. Really? 2.5?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, one of my other moments in the movie is when they get to the hotel and they get out of the bus and the guy goes, "Hey, you can't park here," and then he goes, "Oh, it's okay, Lenny. It's the drag queens." Right? That's the director of the movie. That's Stephen Elliott.
Mm.
So yeah.
It says
I
here on Wiki, because Wikipedia doesn't lie. Uh, Multiple critics pointed out the film's similarities, they're talking about Tu Wong Fu, to The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and said Tu Wong Fu was subpar in comparison due to the predictability of its plot, script, and tonal unevenness.
it's a
So
bad it's a
it's
bad
a bad
remake.
ripoff. Yeah.
It's a bad ripoff. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I like the final scene in the like. I enjoy all the dance scenes in the movie and the costume changes, but that final one where they go from costume to costume to costume, I'm pretty sure that's what won them the Oscar because they go from
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a Jurassic Park Velociraptor or Dilophosaurus raptor.
Hey, Jurassic Park in both movies.
Yeah, there's a reference in that. There's the
Which
Sydney
makes
Opera
sense because this is
House.
right after Jurassic came out. Yeah.
Um, I also didn't mind the kid showing up at the end. I thought that I loved that the kid was unfazed by who his dad was.
It shows even then, in 1994, that Gen Z was always with it.
Mm-hmm.
That Gen Z was always okay with everything. You
Yeah.
can see a representation of this 30-year-old movie. So
Mm-hmm.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Adam and the kid are playing, and Adam's like, your dad's blah, blah, blah. And he goes, yeah, is he going to have a
Like, I don't
boyfriend?
give
He's
a
like, I
shit.
don't know. And he
Mhm.
goes, you want to go to my room and play Lego?
Yeah, it doesn't make any
And
difference.
Adam just looks at him like, the hell?
He's
That
like,
doesn't
fuck, I'm the old
matter to
man
you?
now. I
It's
used
like,
to
yeah, I
think I
don't
was the young
care.
person with the new ideas and the fresh way of looking at it. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm the old fuck. This kid had never even bothered him at all.
Yep.
Which, it's kind of that Moneyball moment in a way where it was like, I've been out there trying to change everybody's perceptions and stuff, but turns
Mm-hmm.
out it was happening all along.
All along, yeah. Tick. There's a moment where Tick says to his son, "You know what I am, don't you?" And the kid, without even looking up at him, goes, "Mom says you're the best in the business." And that's what matters to him.
Right.
Not, yeah, that's what matters to him. And then, I hope he gets a boyfriend because it makes him happy, and then at the end, making the kid dead name Bernadette is pretty stone cold by Adam. That's a pretty funny, bye Ralph. That's rough. That's rough.
But that's in keeping with how that character deals with things.
Yeah. For me, it's an infinitely rewatchable movie. Like you can watch that movie over and over again and still get laughs out of it, still get something out of it. It's funny, it's poignant. It's easily 4.5 stars for me. 4.5. Yeah. So I'm gonna go 4.5. I think it's an easy LGBT classic. I think it's an easy classic just in general. It's beautifully made. Again, Oscar for the costumes. So I'm gonna go 4.5 on that.
Yeah, that's the general consensus. General consensus, sir. On
a general consensus.
It's on things sites like Letterboxd and whatnot. Most people give it.
It's just so well made, so well written, so well done. I love that movie. I have since I saw it in like '96. I watch it easily once a year. So one of my favorites. Well, all right. Well, that's that. What else you got for me this week?
That was the two movies this week. Yeah.
Or am I supposed to give you the movie this choice?
Oh, that's right. Let's see. So let me double check on.
I think I gave you Adventures of Priscilla to start with.
Oh, if I said that one, then you said that one. So I say first. Okay.
So go ahead, please.
I think. I don't know. It doesn't really matter anyway.
It doesn't really matter. You go. Go ahead.
Okay, so last week we had A Knight's Tale, right? And this week we had Knightriders.
Oh, God.
So we got to finish the trilogy.
No, we really don't. What do you got?
The Hollywood Knights.
The Hollywood Knights. What jousting is in that?
There's no crazy, but it's knights, and it's spelled the same way. We're going back to 1980 with our first American Graffiti ripoff pseudo teen sex comedy set on Halloween about a car club before they have to go to Vietnam movie, starring that one guy from the Alien Nation TV show. I enjoyed the movie. Michael Jackson once said it was the favorite movie of all time. For the Hollywood Knights to complete our Knights trilogy.
Oh, fuck, that's great.
Completely out of left field. That is. Yeah.
Okay, well, that is definitely out of left field.
You thought it was going to be more jousting.
I thought. I was like, what more jousting are you going to give me? I'm going to give you. I really honestly need a palate cleanser after Knightriders.
Right.
Just something to clear the palate and ready me for something else. So I'm going to give you one of my favorites. Again, Priscilla was also a favorite, but I think it was kind of an important movie, and I wanted to do it early. But this is one of my favorites, so I'm going to give you That Thing You Do.
Oh, nice.
Which is I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first of the Playtone productions with Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. So,
well, I definitely know it's the first music movie we've covered on Talking Pondo. Right? We have
that's appropriate.
A band film before. And there's a lot of music in the Hollywood Knights as well. That's why it couldn't come out on video for the longest time.
Yeah, the soundtrack on that thing would be a nightmare to clear for sure. I'm shocked they were able to do it for cable and for film.
Wow, that's going to be a nice mashup of eras, because that one's set. Is That Thing You Do set in the 60s?
It is,
and Hollywood Knights is also set in the 60s.
Late 60s. Yeah. So, it's going to be East Coast 66, West Coast 69.
Ah.
So it should be pretty interesting.
Nice.
Well, all right, man. Well, I guess that's that. I'll see you next week.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. And again, hit us up on our socials. They're in our show notes.
Mm-hmm.
Later, Marty.
Laters.